Welcome to this episode of Streetsmart Marketer TV. My name is Paul Tobey. Thank you once again for joining us. This week we've got some interesting stuff. We're going to take a question from Twitter, which is quite interesting, and I've got a really great answer. We're also going to do a new segment called Animalogy, or I'm not sure exactly how we pronounce that, but we came up with a name and it's going to be really interesting. It's about an animal story that actually makes sense and helps us learn something. But first, let's go in the news, and this is this week's marketing news. First up, Google Chrome. Many of you use it. It's a great browser, but Google Chrome and other browsers are following suit. They've actually come up with a policy to not allow videos to play automatically. So they're actually disallowing what we call autoplay. So that means that if you've got a video on your website that has sound, and it plays automatically when the page loads, Chrome won't actually let it play. Interesting, they're trying to cut down on those really loud noises when people end up on pages with videos. Next in the news, you probably heard of this one. I'm not sure whether you're doing it already, but if your site, that means your website or your client's websites, are not secure, what does that mean? Well, they have an SSL certificate in the background, but they're considered HTTPS, which means a secure environment. Why is that important? Well, Google has basically said it's going to give preference to those sites in Google search. So if your website is not already HTTPS, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is over the next little while, switch it to HTTPS, and you'll be much, much happier with all the extra traffic that Google will send you. Next in the news, Twitter, as always, not only makes the news, but it is the news. And this is really all about Twitter's stock price. It's actually at a 3-year high, which is up 155% over the past year. There's a problem with that, though, in that their user growth is up a mere 3%. So while the stock price is way up here, user growth is relatively stagnant. Twitter's response to this is to basically pick on the competition and tweet them while they're down. So they're pointing out all the mistakes that Facebook is making. They're pointing out all the mistakes that Pinterest and LinkedIn are making. So basically trying to prop themselves up by pushing others down. Only time will tell if that is a good strategy. But if you own shares in Twitter, my suggestion is you pay attention to the actual growth. The stock price may be inflated. And finally, there's this guy in England. He's a Brit. His name is Alex too, and he came up with a project out of university called $1 Million Homepage. Some of you may have heard of this. I found it interesting, so I thought I'd bring it up here. Basically, what he decided to do was build a one-page website and sell every pixel on that website as advertisement. So if you bought a 10 by 10, you owned 100 pixels, and they charged you $1 per pixel. So a 10 by 10 logo on the website with a link to your website would cost you $100. Let me show you that page. It's quite interesting. So this is the entire website. This is called the $1 Million Homepage because the total sum pixels on this web page added up to $1 million in revenue. So the guy, within a few months, because it got picked up by the BBC and other news agencies as a cool idea, actually took off, and he made a whole $1 million off of this site. So good ideas never cease to amaze me. And so that ends in the news for this week. My name is Paul Tobey. In the next segment coming up, we're going to take a question from Twitter. You're going to love it. Talk to you soon. Welcome back to this week's episode of Streetsmart Marketer TV. My name is Paul Tobey. Thanks again for joining us. In this segment, we take questions from Twitter, and they're important questions. We try to sift through them, but this week, the important question comes from Lara Dolphy. How can I advertise my hashtag local business without spending a fortune? Hashtag money well spent in 5 words. Well, the answer to that can only come from experience. And as someone who has marketed not only my local business, which is no longer local, but when I started out it was, but advertising multiple local businesses over the last several years, I thought about this significantly, and I came up with what I think are my top 5 local advertising strategies. Local small business. Number 1, Absolutely, Facebook is very important. Facebook is a great way to target your audience based on likes and preferences and demographics and geographics. It's display advertising. People spend a lot of time on Facebook. It's a great place to be. It's very cost effective. You can actually pay attention to the conversion, unlike print media. It will tell you how well you're doing. So that's my number one recommendation. Number two, this is absolutely the most underestimated local business strategy there is. It's amazing how little thought and time and energy people put into their Google business listing. So whether you're doing Google search or you're using Google Maps, getting your business listing front and center when people do a search is very, very important. So get in there, get some good photos in there, get some great reviews, super, super important to do that. Also, make sure that all of the company information, whether you're a restaurant or whatever, get some menus in there, get your hours in there. Also use good keyword phrases in the Google business listing to be found. Very underestimated strategy, highly recommended. Number three, Google AdWords. Now, we are a Google partner, so it stands to reason that we will try to help you spend some money in AdWords. There's a reason why AdWords works, and you can check previous episodes of Streetsmart Marketer or some coming up which talk about specific AdWords strategies. It's a bit of an overview, but here's what I'm going to say. You cannot rank your website for every keyword phrase that is relevant to you, especially when you're talking about this city or your city or outside that city. So depending on where you are, you're going to have varying degrees of search results. So if you want that traffic, you have to buy it. And so if you want to buy search traffic, Google AdWords is absolutely the best for you. Raise your hand if you haven't been on Google in the last 24 hours. Everybody uses it. It's very important to the longevity and the steady stream of incoming leads and sales to your company. Number four, this is my favorite. Email marketing, it's always been my favorite. I learned very early on that the money is in the list. It's in the email list. These days, it's in the data-rich email list, which means the more emails you have and the more data you can mine from those customers, the better it is. They don't buy when you're ready to sell. They buy when they're ready. And if you're not in front of them through email marketing over the next 6 to 12 months, when they finally make a decision, they're going to make it with somebody else because you weren't there and they didn't learn to trust you to give you their money. So email marketing makes my list definitely very top. Number five, this one sounds a little bit maybe out there, but in terms of marketing your local business, when you speak at events, and we're talking about conferences, trade shows, networking meetings, when you put a microphone on and you stand in front of an audience, you automatically become what's known as a subject matter expert. That builds a level of authority, and people go, well, you seem to know what you're talking about, and they approach you with a business card or a connection, and they're asking for your information and advice. That brings in, and has brought in for me, a lot of business over the past several years. So if you don't know how to speak and it's not high on your list of priorities, you might want to make it one, because it's a great, great strategy to bring in some business. So there are my top 5 local business and small business advertising tips. Thank you to Laura again for the question on Twitter. My name is Paul Tobey. See you in the next segment. Hey there, once again, Paul Tobey here, Streetsmart Marketer TV. In the final segment of this episode, we've got a segment called Animalogy. And what it is, it's an animal story that relates to real life, and what did we actually learn from it. So this is really interesting, so check this out. How do they train whales to, on cue, basically when you do one of these things, and I download this really cool thing, it's a whistle. So when the whistle goes off, how do they get the whale on a whistle to jump to a ball that's above the pool, like 20 feet in the air? How do they get this seemingly wild creature to do that? Well, the answer is they train it over a matter of months, and this is how they do it. So first, they put the whale in the pool and they let it swim around for a while, just get used to the environment. Then what they do is they introduce a line across the bottom of the pool, and if the whale swims only from side to side, it gets no food. As soon as it passes over it, it gets fed. That's interesting. Then they raise the line to the middle of the pool. If the whale swims underneath it or side to side on one side, it doesn't get fed, but if it swims over it, it gets fed. So pretty much it learns how to go over the rope. Then they raise it to the surface of the pool, let the whale swim around for a while, and let it get really, really hungry until it decides, okay, I'm going to go over the rope because I've kind of learned that. It gets fed. Then what they do is they take the rope, they raise it 20 feet in the air, and they let the whale get really hungry. So eventually, the whale learns to do this, get over the rope, and the whale gets fed. So that's very interesting. How long does that take? Several months, apparently, if you read about the training. And so from that, you can determine the following. Here's what we learned. We learned that it only takes two things to be successful at anything in life. I actually learned this from one of my former mentors, who's not around anymore, but his name was Brian Clemmer, and he taught me this. Only two things to be successful. Number one, repetition. Doing things over and over and over again until they become ingrained in you, and then you start learning something new. So once you repeat things several times, you actually learn and understand. But number two is, if you're going to learn that, whatever you do, you must be emotionally involved. Just like the whale, who's so hungry, it feels like it's not being nourished, so essentially it will end up doing things because it becomes emotionally involved. So, two things. One, repetition. Two, become emotionally involved. That's it for this week's Streetsmart Marketer TV. I hope you got some great information this week. As always, spread the news about the Streetsmart Marketer TV channel. Have your friends come here, subscribe. It's absolutely free. And once again, it's Paul Tobey. Have a great day.